All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to be continuing exploring the different races of the Player's Handbook. Originally I was not planning on doing one race per video because I didn't think there was enough to talk about for each one. But thus far, every one of these things, there's a lot more here that you can use than I originally thought. So even me myself, when preaching to you all about please don't undervalue the different things, the different advantages that your race gives you, I have been undervaluing them, thinking that there wasn't much that are there. So yeah, at least for the time being, I think it's going to be one race per video, and we'll see how that goes. Some of the races are a little bit more simplistic, so maybe I might get two in them. But for this video, we're going to be talking about the gnome. Look around you. There are many things to see. For those who have no idea what that is the theme song to David the Gnome, which I never watched when I was a kid, and I don't know why, because it is just the most adorable program ever. And it's all about how great nature is. But anyway, gnomes. Gnomes are interesting because, again, when people think of fantasy races, they always elves and dwarves are always in there. If you're talking Lord of the Rings, halflings are in there because the hobbits are such a big deal. But gnomes are not quite as well known, and it's mostly because they kind of get confused because when you start thinking, like, a lot of people think of these races effectively as their most common class. Dwarves, they're fighters. They go, they build things, they break things, rah, 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 rah. Or sometimes they're clerics and they hit things with hammer and then heal them. And then elves are shooty, slicey. I'm Legolas. And then halflings are sneaky, thiefy. But you think of gnomes, you're like, oh, what's in a gnome? But gnomes themselves are, they're interesting. They're, the base race itself and the kind of lore behind it. They're an inquisitive, very intelligent race. They tend to be, closely associated with magic in general. And one of the unique things, we won't go, into that sub, race, here, but there are multiple Underdark versions of races. Like dwarves have an Underdark version called the Duragar, which are effectively like evil underground dwarves. Elves have the Drow, or the Dark Elves, which are evil elves that live underground. The gnomes have the deep gnomes, or Svirfneblin. It's just hard to say without a stutter. With a stutter, it's almost impossible. But they are based on, I believe, something in Nordic mythology. But they're gnomes from the Underdark. But unlike their other cousins, when you're talking about alignments, which again we've kind of thrown out alignments, but lore-wise, deep gnomes are actually just as good aligned as their above-ground companions. So gnomes are kind of unique in the fact that all of these sub-races tend to be very benevolent and things like that. So that's kind of cool. Again, when I think of gnomes, I think mostly of spellcasters. We'll get into why that is in a second here, but yeah. So let's dive into the gnome itself. So again, as a brief refresher for how races work, all races are going to have an ability scoring could increase. If there are sub races, you will have half your ability scoring could increase will be built into the base race, and the other half of it will be built into a sub race. You're also going to have age, alignment, size, and speed, and whether or not they have dark vision. Those are all kind of base race things, and then after that you have your race specific traits that are really going to modify how you play your character. So for the gnome itself, the first thing, the ability score increase. Gnome does have sub races, so we're only getting half of it here. But their base ability score increase is you increase your intelligence score by 2, which means gnomes make really, really good wizards. Again, we've already talked about lore-wise. They tend to be a little bit more magically inclined. Because they get an increase to their intelligence as a score, it means any casters that rely on intelligence, they're going to do well as. So the 40 bajillion different flavors of wizards, they're going to be great at. Also, if you go with something like an Eldritch Knight fighter, Eldritch Knights use intelligence for their casting modifier, but they still get to fight and everything like that. So seeing Eldritch Knights gnomes is not uncommon, and is adorable. I love the idea of a gnome fighter, just seeing, someone that's only 3 feet tall wearing, full plate, and like a bastard sword and shield, just coming in and going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then unleashing hell with a spell every so often. I think it's just super cool. The other thing that people don't think about when they're thinking the intelligence score is intelligence is used for investigation. And investigation is really, really useful for finding traps. Most people think halflings when they think of rogues. Yeah, halfling rogue is really traditional. In 3rd edition, the halfling's preferred class or specialty class, whatever it was called, was the rogue. But a gnome rogue can make a really, really good arcane trickster, and can make really any other rogue that wants to be, stealthy, and be kind of a front scout, because they can use their investigation to do so many things. They can find all the traps themselves. They can use their thieves tool to disarm them. They can be a one-man infiltration team. So don't discount other uses for intelligence just because it's also used for wizards as spellcasting. It's not the only thing you can use it for. Age, they mature at the same rate humans do. However, because they're longer lived, they're expected to be settle down into adult life by around age 40. However, they can live anywhere from about 350 to 500 years. So they're actually longer lived than dwarves, but they're expected to be adults and be doing adult things by around age 40. So gnomes in general are going to mature emotionally and responsibilities-wise a little faster than the dwarves, despite the fact that they're going to live longer than the dwarves as well. Which is another thing that's kind of interesting. It might have something to do with them, the race just having a natural gift to their intelligence, or it might be a billion other things. I just like that idea that gnomes and dwarves are going... Gnomes to the dwarves and humans are all going to physically mature about the same. Things like most guys, most girls just stop growing in their early, very, very early to the teens, whereas most guys stop growing anywhere between age 18 and about to the 25. You're going to look like your adult self by around 18 to 25 for all 3 races. But humans, by the time they reach 30, they're expected to be fully grown adults and have responsibilities and everything. Dwarves are still considered youngsters until they're around 50, whereas gnomes are supposed to reach around the same matureness level at around age 40. So you have three, decade apart the things of, well, when are you supposed to have your quote unquote life together? And I like that. I think it's interesting. Alignment, we don't care about. Size, they're between 3 and 4 feet tall, and they're 40 pounds. One of the interesting thing about gnomes, they are small instead of medium, which is not a massive change. You're still going to fit into the same. You're still going to fit into a 5 foot square. It generally means gnomes can fit multiple gnomes into a 5 foot square, whereas any medium creature you can only fit one. Unless you're squeezing. So it does change things slightly. It also means if you use something two-handed, and I need to find, where are you? I believe when you're talking about size in D&D, a small character, if they are using a versatile weapon, which is a weapon that can be used either one-handed or two-handed, they have to use it to do two-handed. And in general, a small character cannot use two-handed weapons because they're simply too large for them. I think that's what it is. I may be 100% wrong, but that's for some reason that's what I think it is. I will look it up later because there's not a quick way to do it. But if I remember correctly, that's what it is. So gnomes are, because they are small, are limited a little bit in the weapons they can choose, but that doesn't mean that they can't still be any single class you want them to be. Base walking speed is 25 feet, which again is relatively standard for the small races. And then gnomes do have the dark vision out to 60 feet. So just like dwarves, dark vision, very useful. It basically means you don't need to use light sources or anything like that when you're traveling, which is always nice. Now, one thing a lot of people will forget about the dark vision, you may have dark vision out to 60 feet, but if you are in darkness, that means anything beyond 60 feet is you are blind to. You cannot see further than 60 feet if you are in darkness. Whereas if you have a light, like maybe you cast light on an arrow and you shoot it, further away, you can actually see what's illuminated pretty far away, as far as your normal vision would allow you. But in darkness, anything outside of 60 feet you are completely blind to. So any ranged attacks you make, you can only make within 60 feet. Otherwise, you have no line of sight to it. So, and then we go to the actual specific abilities for gnomes. Gnomes actually only have one specific base ability, which again, a lot of people will go, oh, well, then gnomes aren't anywhere near as useful as like dwarves, which got like half a dozen different things. But the one thing they've got is really useful. And it's probably why they only get one thing. Gnomes get gnome cunning, which is you have advantage on all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against magic. Now, we've talked before, most damaging magic is dexterity saves. Every so often, if you're using cold magic or poison magic, you might have a con save. But most damaging magic is going to be those. Any magic that messes with your brain, like charms or paralysis or anything like that, those are the really bad spells. And those are all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Resisting stuns from a mind flare is an intelligence save. Those are really important saves to make, and gnomes have advantage on all of them. So it's not completely broken, as in, you have advantage on all saves against magic, but as long as it is a magic spell and not an ability, you're going to have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves. It means gnomes are very hard to control their mind. It's very difficult to use magic to cause fear on them, use the spells like oh, my brain is just gone today. Spells that paralyze and things like that generally will be wisdom saves, things like that. So very, very useful, and you can use that to your advantage when you're picking your class of maybe choosing a fighter or a barbarian, which are not known for their high wisdom or intelligence, but having advantage on their saves means you're not going to have to worry about turning against your allies, and maybe taking the mage slayer feat, and you can turn into this really, really powerful anti-magic user character that's super small and adorable. And then languages, they can speak and write Common and Gnomish, which is, yeah, exactly what you would think. Moving on, there are two subclasses of Gnome. They are the Forest Gnome and the Rock Gnome. And they're both going to kind of shift you a little bit more towards different classes and things to do. So starting with the Forest Gnome. First thing, your ability score increase. You get a Dex increased by 1. So Forest Gnomes, remember how I mentioned gnomes can make really good arcane tricksters because they use intelligence and they just need some dexterity? Well, Forest Gnomes will let you do that. You can create a really interesting rogue character, and it doesn't have to be an arcane trickster. Again, most people think gnomes, and because they're intelligence, they're like, oh, well, he has to be an arcane trickster. No, make them just a standard, I think it's the thief subclass, that just goes in and steals stuff, and using their investigation, you can find any issue you have when you're infiltrating a place, and then use second story work to get in and out of windows and stuff like that. Like, really, really useful there. Or go something completely different. Go for an Eldritch Knight, but be a Dex-based Eldritch Knight instead of a Strength-based one. And maybe you take the throwing weapons of a fighting style, and you are a ranged Eldritch Knight that uses ranged weapons to do uses throwing weapons to do cool things. Again, don't just think about what is the obvious answer. Despite the fact that yes, the rogue would be the absolute obvious answer for this. Another thing, if you don't have to worry about the limitation to elves, is going Blade Singer with your Forest Gnome, simply because Blade Singers use dexterity a lot and intelligence because they're wizards as a subclass, but being able to use the increased intelligence, the kind of resistance against mind-altering spells and things like that, you could create a really interesting Blade Singer. The second thing that Forest Gnomes gets is called Natural Illusionist. And they know the spell Minor Illusion, the cantrip Minor Illusion, and Intelligence is your spellcasting ability for it. Minor Illusion is one of those things that I think is really undervalued, simply because people think of prestidigitation as kind of the Swiss Army knife of things. You use prestidigitation to do a lot of different things, but Minor Illusion can be really, really useful if you use it correctly. Specifically, so Minor Illusion, you can either create an object that can be no larger than a 5-foot cube, or you can create a sound. And the sound aspect is probably one of the most useful because you can use it when you're being specifically stealthy, which again, as the rock gnome, you're going to have a bonus to your dexterity anyways. You can use it to confuse and upset your enemies before they know that you're there. You can use it to distract enemies, make them think you're somewhere else, effectively throwing your voice into the things like that. There are so many different ways that making sound come from a place it's not supposed to can be just super, super, super useful. So don't undervalue the use of the minor illusion cantrip, no matter what class you are. Especially if you do decide to play against type and maybe you're a gnome barbarian or something. Being able to use minor illusion to get the enemies to kind of separate means you can run in and kill one before the other two can do anything, and possibly end the fight before it starts. Simply because by the time they get to you, you have another 2 or 3 attacks to just completely demolish them with. So, yeah, cool stuff. The final thing for the Forest Gnome is speak with small beasts. And this is another one that most people just kind of throw out of, oh, role-playing stuff. Why would I ever want to do that? But again, when you look at this for just the myriad of things you can do with it, it's super cool and fun. So basically, speak with small beasts. You can communicate simple ideas with small or smaller beasts. So what does that mean? Well, squirrels, badgers, rabbits, moles, woodpeckers, other things like that, you can communicate simple ideas. So you're not going to be able to have large conversations, but you can get simple ideas across, meaning you can train them, you can get them to act as scouts for you effectively. Now, it's not going to work like a familiar or anything like that, where you can see through their eyes or anything like that. But you can take a woodpecker and communicate simple ideas of orcs. I want you to fly to the orcs and knock on a tree when you find them. So if you're searching for orcs, you can have this woodpecker go out using an animal handling to check and tap on a tree so you know exactly where they are. The orcs will have no idea that that's what you've done. Whereas if you're using a familiar, having a familiar act like a familiar, like it would, might set them off if they're looking for magic users or things like that, or they're super paranoid. They go, wait a minute, that looks like a familiar. But a woodpecker going off and pecking on wood. Woodpeckers generally aren't familiars. So yeah, think about it that way. Again, no matter what class you are, being able to have squirrels run interference for you by, going in and, annoying people, or maybe using the squirrels to actually grab the things for you. Badgers to dig under foundations and things like that to make them less sturdy and things like that. Like, there's so many things. Sending rabbits in to chew up crops and things like that to piss off an evil warlord or something. There's so many different things that you can do with it. That a lot of people just ignore. So, yeah, definitely cool stuff. Finally, we have the rock gnome. Rock gnomes are interesting, simply because they add an ability score increase that people don't think of, which is you get a constitution score increase by 1. And so when people think of it, it's like, well, warlock, gnomes are wizards. Why in the world would I need a constitution score as a wizard? I'm just going to hang back. Well, again, if you want to play against type, you can do something interesting. And again, constitution is useful for literally every class, but most people see a constitution score and they think physical classes like fighters or barbarians. And just having that additional constitution score can be kind of fun. No matter what class you do. And again, if you want to play a really weird, unique character, make a rock gnome. Make a rock gnome monk. Intelligence and constitution don't help monks whatsoever. They are dexterity and wisdom. That's what they need. But a monk, even a monk that gets, they're 15 in their dex, you start off, and then 14 in wisdom, and then 13 you put in constitution, so you have another 14, and then you go to 12 in their intelligence, which gives them 14, and then 10 charisma, 8 stamina. You have this really interesting, very knowledgeable monk that, again, if you go shadow monk, can be your rogue effectively, because they can see everything, they can move super fast, they can step through shadows. If you take something like the criminal background, you have proficiency into the thieves tools, and you can come up with a really cool monk that can find their own traps, is really hard to mind control or anything like that. Monks eventually get proficiency in all saving throws, so you would be really good by having all those different ability scores that high. So yeah, just interesting things like that. In addition to that, they have Artificer's Lore, which basically anytime you make an intelligence history check related to magic items, alchemical objects, or technological devices, you can add twice your proficiency bonus instead of any proficiency bonus you would normally apply. So again, they basically have expertise in history checks, specifically for magic items, alchemy, and tech. Which, again, I've mentioned this before, knowledge is power. And something that a lot of people don't think of often is big bad guys a lot of times will have magic items that they use. And being able to make history checks to know what their magic items do before you get into combat with them can be invaluable. Because if they have this wicked looking sword that you've never seen before, but it looks rough, it's really nice to know that this sword can absorb your soul into it if it strikes a killing blow. And being able to use our Artificer's Lore for that is really good. And again, you can use it in other ways, like, again, something as simple as knowing how to break into a drawbridge, because drawbridge are technology. So are portcullises, anything using pulleys and levers and things like that. Technology is quote unquote primitive compared to what we would think of technology, but it's still technology. So there's a lot you can do with that. And again, if you're going to get the most out of your race, use as much as you can of it. The final thing that Rock Gnomes gets is called Tinker. You get proficiency with artisan's tools, which they say are tinker's tools. Using these tools, you can spend 1 hour and 10 gold pieces worth of materials to construct a tiny clockwork device. AC 5, 1 hit point. The device ceases to function after 24 hours, unless you spend an hour repairing it to keep the device functioning. Or when you use your action to dismantle it, at that time you can reclaim the materials used to create it. You can have up to 3 such devices at a time. When you create the device, you can create one of the following options. Clockwork toy, which is an animal, monster, or person, such as a frog, mouse, bird, dog, or soldier. When placed on the ground, the toy moves 5 feet across the ground on each of your turns in a random direction. It makes noises as appropriate to the creature it represents. Firestarter lets you produce flame, which you can use to light stuff. And using the device requires an action. And then Music Box, when open, the Music Box plays a single song at a moderate volume. The box stops playing when it reaches the song's end or when it closes. There's a lot you can do with this if you're a clever player. Again, if you're being sneak, taking a clockwork toy and setting it somewhere and then going around can lure enemies towards it. And these don't have to be intelligent enemies. A lot of times, creatures are naturally curious, especially if they're apex-style creatures where they're at the top of their food chain. If they're not afraid of something attacking them, they're going to hear noise. They're going to go, ooh, something else for me to eat. And humans in general, when they hear noise, we're naturally inquisitive as a species. So they'll go over and they'll look at it, and it's a great way to set up ambushes. And you can have a lot of fun with it too. Make it a little soldier that, as it goes 5 feet across the ground and does stuff, eventually it stops. and you know a little sign pops out and goes "sucks to be you," and everyone it attacks when that happens. You know, have a lot of fun with that. Fire starter, fire is the answer to everything. It is. I have run many, many, many Giga games. Fire is always the answer. Trust me on this one. It's just if you can set it on fire, do it. Doesn't even matter if it's not D&D. Doesn't matter if it's not supposed to be set on fire, or it's not flammable, or it's inflammable. Fire is probably the solution anyway. This gives you fire. So, yeah. And then finally, the music box. This is another one where, yes, making noise can be good. However, if you want to play psychological games with your enemy, there's nothing creepier than music that just starts playing in a minor key randomly and then starts to slow down as the clockwork gears lose the tension spring. Like, that's just super creepy. And if you just keep winding the music box and placing it in different places, you can super mess with your enemies. So yeah. Overall, you know, final thoughts for the gnome. Gnomes are really cool. Again, most people will just kind of limit them to, oh, I'm going to be a wizard. Or, I'm going to be an arcane to the trickster rogue, and I'm going to choose the forest gnome. Yeah, those can be really, really good classes, but there's so many other things you can do with it. And if you play against type, using some of these things, like using the minor illusion cantrip when you're a barbarian, can be a lot of fun. Or using the tinker ability when you are a ranger can have some really awesome side effects. So don't be afraid to go against type with the gnome. But your absolute perfect class is generally going to be a wizard, simply because of how good they are with my magic. So anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What is your ideal, adorable gnome off-type class? Do you like the idea of a gnome wandering around in heavy armor? Would you prefer your gnome to have a battle axe and go into a rage? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, that's all for me today, and I will see you guys next time, all right? Bye-bye.